I promise you, I will never sugarcoat our challenges. Instead, I will talk with you directly and regularly about our plan, why we're doing what we're doing, what's working, what isn't, and what we're going to do next.
Canadians were told the worst was over. Inflation was supposed to be cooling, interest rates were supposed to stop crushing families, and the economy was supposed to be moving toward relief. But walk into any grocery store, pull up to any gas station, open any rent payment app, or look at any mortgage renewal notice, and the picture feels completely different. That is the real political danger now facing Canada. On paper, the numbers sound manageable. In real life, millions of Canadians still feel like they are running on a treadmill that keeps getting faster. The bills are still high, the pressure is still constant, and the promise of relief still feels just out of reach. And that is why this moment matters so much for Mark Carney. Because while Ottawa can talk about trade, diplomacy, and long-term strategy, voters are living a much simpler reality. They do not judge the economy by speeches. They judge it by whether they can afford eggs, vegetables, fuel, rent, and a little breathing room at the end of the month. And right now, too many Canadians feel like that breathing room has vanished. The political class may say inflation is under control, but if families still feel poorer every single week, then the crisis is not over. It has only changed shape. Canada's annual inflation rate rose to 2.4% in March 2026. Store-bought food prices were up 4.4%, and fresh vegetables jumped 7.8%, while March energy prices also surged month to month. This is the trap in the current debate. Headline inflation is one thing, lived inflation is another. When economists and central bankers look at the national average, they see a country that is not in runaway crisis. But when ordinary people look at their bank account, they see repeated hits from every direction. One week it is groceries, the next week it is gasoline, then rent, then childcare, then insurance, then a credit card bill that takes longer to pay off than it used to. That is why so many Canadians feel broke even when they are told the economy is stabilizing. Stability is not the same thing as relief. If prices stop rising as fast as before, but they stay painfully high, families still feel trapped. That is especially true after several years of cost increases that permanently pushed the monthly cost of survival higher. And in March, that sense of pressure was reinforced again. Food prices in stores kept rising, restaurant prices were still higher than a year earlier, and energy costs snapped upward. Reuters reported that gasoline prices rose sharply, driven in part by turmoil in oil markets tied to the Middle East conflict, while Statistics Canada showed the monthly energy increase was dramatic. So even if officials describe part of this as temporary, voters do not experience it as temporary. They experience it as another month where the budget gets tighter and the anxiety gets heavier. Energy prices rose 13.1% month to month in March. Fuel oil and other fuels were up 26.1% year over year, and restaurant prices still rose 3.2% from a year earlier. Then there is the labour market, which tells a quieter but equally important story. Canada is not in a dramatic employment collapse, but the job market is clearly not giving people the confidence they want either. Employment in March barely moved. Unemployment held at 6.7%, and hiring remains slower than the pre-pandemic norm. That matters because people can tolerate high prices a little longer if they feel secure in their work and optimistic about their prospects. But if prices stay high, while job opportunities soften, fear spreads fast. It is not only about losing a job, it is about worrying that if you lose one, the next one may take longer to find, pay less, or come with less stability. That feeling can freeze consumer confidence even before a formal recession shows up, and the provincial picture adds to that unease. Ontario's unemployment rate remained elevated at 7.6%, with Statistics Canada directly linking challenging labour market conditions in parts of southern Ontario to uncertainty around tariffs on exports to the United States. In other words, this is not only a household affordability issue, it is also a confidence issue, a jobs issue, and a future issue. If Canadians begin to feel that prices are high today and opportunities are weaker tomorrow, the political consequences could be severe. Because once people start believing the system no longer rewards hard work with basic stability, frustration turns into anger very quickly. Employment rose by just 14,000 in March. The unemployment rate stayed at 6.7%. And Statistics Canada said job-finding rates remained below pre-pandemic averages, suggesting higher unemployment is being driven more by slower hiring than by mass layoffs. Housing makes all of this even worse, because no matter what happens with inflation, Canadians know the single biggest cost in their life is still shelter. And that crisis has not been solved. Even people who are not trying to buy a home feel it through rent, tighter vacancy markets, and the ripple effects that housing costs send through the entire economy. For younger Canadians, housing has become more than a financial issue. It is now a symbol of whether the country still works. Can you build a future here? Can you raise a family here? Can you stay in the city where you work? Can you save anything at all while paying for a place to live? Those are now political questions as much as economic ones. That is why Carney has put housing at the centre of his affordability language. But the numbers show how difficult the problem remains. Reuters reported that Canadian housing starts unexpectedly fell 6% in March, not rose. That is a bad signal in a country already struggling with supply shortages. When supply underperforms while demand pressure remains intense, affordability does not improve fast enough to restore public faith. So when politicians tell Canadians to be patient, many hear something very different. Wait longer, pay more, and lower your expectations. That message is politically toxic, and unless supply begins to accelerate in a visible way, housing will continue to act like a multiplier on every other pressure families are already feeling. Canadian housing starts fell to a seasonally adjusted annualized rate of 235,852 units in March from 250,961 in February, missing economist expectations for an increase. This is where the Bank of Canada becomes central to the story because many Canadians are waiting for one thing above all else: relief on borrowing costs. The policy rate is currently 2.25%, and the next decision is due on April 29th. That date matters because the bank is now walking a narrow line. Cut too soon and inflation pressure could revive. Hold too long and households and businesses remain squeezed. That tension is exactly why so many people feel stuck in limbo. They want relief, but they also know the system is still fragile. What makes this politically dangerous is that central banks can explain caution, but elected governments cannot hide behind caution forever. Eventually, voters want results. They want to know who is going to lower the pressure in their real daily life. Carney clearly understands that risk. Reuters reported that he is now prioritizing cost of living, housing shortages, and major infrastructure, while also moving to temporarily suspend a fuel tax to lower gas bills. That helps politically because it shows immediate action, but it also reveals the scale of the challenge. If government is reaching for visible affordability measures this early, it means the pressure is real and the public mood is serious. Canadians are not in the mood for abstract reassurance. They want proof that someone in power understands what it feels like to carry all of this at once. The Bank of Canada held its policy rate at 2.25% on March 18th and scheduled its next decision for April 29th, while Carney's government said the temporary fuel tax suspension would cut regular gasoline prices by about 10 cents per litre. So this is the real question facing Canada now. If inflation is lower than the worst moments of the past few years, why does the country still feel so tense, so angry, and so financially exhausted? The answer is that affordability is not a headline, it is a lived condition. People remember what life used to cost. They compare that to what it costs now. And if wages, savings, and security have not kept up, they conclude that the economy is failing them, even if the charts look less alarming than before. That is the challenge waiting for Carney. Not just managing numbers, but rebuilding trust. Not just telling Canadians that the economy is adapting, but proving that ordinary life can become more affordable, more stable, and more hopeful. Because if he cannot do that, then this will become the defining political narrative of the year. Inflation came down, but Canada still feels broken. And that message would be devastating because it cuts deeper than a normal policy disagreement. It suggests that the country's institutions can describe the pain, measure the pain, and debate the pain, but still cannot meaningfully ease it. In the end, that is why this story matters so much. The real economic battle in Canada is no longer about whether inflation is technically lower. It is about whether Canadians can actually feel the difference. And until they do, the cost of living crisis is not yesterday's story. It is the story. Carney has publicly said his government will focus on lowering the cost of living, addressing the housing shortage, and making the economy more independent, while analysts quoted by Reuters say domestic affordability and economic performance are now the real tests of his government. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe to the channel for daily updates. Until next time.